Oh, thank you very much. And thank you to all of you for coming and listening to what we have to say. I did a Nuffield Scholarship at 50 years of age, and I still feel guilty about it. A couple of people in the audience said, "Oh, you're the guy that's the third oldest guy that's ever done a Nuffield Scholarship." And as people were having their plaques awarded the other night for 40 years, I was doing the sums in my head to say, do they give you the 40 years on the day you got your tie or the day you graduate? Because those 2 years could be important to me at the end. So this slide shows four really important people, or groups of people in my scholarship. Firstly, top left are my GFP group. I love them to bits, and I've just so enjoyed catching up with them. In the bottom there, next to shellfish, which I thought was appropriate, my wife and my daughter who came and joined me for the last 2 weeks of my scholarship in America. And people say that Nuffield changes lives. It changed my life, but I can tell you my daughter, after going and seeing the musical Hamilton in New York, looked at me and said, "Dad, that's the best day of my life." And, you know, I didn't think we'd signed up for that when I got my tie, so that means a lot to me. The guys up the top are from my pippy fishing business, and below are the guys from the software business that I'm involved in. So what did I study? And really I'm posing the question, why, when we use smartphones to do every other aspect of our life, including our banking, which you would think would be the most secure thing that we would need to do, why has the fishing industry been so slow to adopt electronic reporting? And that's really what I tried to find out. And there are plenty of people out there, including green groups and Margaret Atwood, who wrote The Handmaid's Tale. I read an article where she was saying that 90% of all the large fish in the ocean, like the tunas and the marlins, were depleted by 90% at the turn of the century. And there are a lot of people with doom and gloom stories, and we need to do a lot as an industry to make sure that we still have wild-caught fish to catch in 2050. But not everyone is so negative. I met what I consider fishing royalty when I met with the guys at the Washington University in Seattle, and a guy called Professor Ray Hilborn, who takes a far more positive view of the way that we manage our fisheries, and said rather than assuming that we're going to collapse everything by 2050, we could actually do a lot to turn that around. And with better science and better data and better gear, we can potentially increase the number of fish that are currently in the water by the time we get to 2050. And so data will play a really important part of that. The paper you see there shows what's called a catch and effort report, and that's a report that we use to tell the scientists what we catch. And it might be a bit hard to read, but the area that I've highlighted in red shows where the fisher has said, "I caught my fish between 18 and 24 kilometres along the beach from where we harvest our pippies." And as a scientist, and us trying to learn more about fisheries, I think that there's a lot that we can do to collect more data than simply writing on a bit of paper that, frankly, most fishers fill in at the end of the month to meet their regulatory requirements all in one hit, and they forgot where they caught those fish anyway. So electronic reporting has been around in commercial fishing since probably the late 1980s, and companies like Orlac and Catchlog have built software to collect data, and they're great products, but they really only operate on large fishing vessels like the one I show you there. And they represent less than 14% of the global fishing industry. And really, the computers that they run on will only operate on vessels with waterproof wheelhouses. 86% of the global fleet operate out of boats like this one, and this is a guy called Glenn Hill who operates in the Lakes and Coorong fishery that I operate in, and that boat is typical of what a lot of fishers operate out of. And interestingly, of that 86% of the global fleet, less than half of those vessels actually have an engine. So gives you an idea of the sorts of ways that we catch our wild-caught fish. So in 2010, this guy rolls up and he says, I've got an idea. I want to replace what we consider to be normal computers and replace it with what is now known as a tablet. And a guy that I used to work with in the advertising industry, which I did for 15 years before I became sort of a fisherman in 2002, got together with me and we said, why don't we use these new iPads to start collecting data on these smaller vessels? And that was 8 years ago. And to say that it has been an easy process would be a very wrong statement. There have been challenges along the way, but we are making some really good inroads, and that's a photo of our deckhand product on one of these small vessels. One of the highlights of my personal study was going to the FAO in Rome for their food security summit about this time last year. And I saw that it's not just our company who's building software to run on smartphones and tablets. There's another company backed by the UN who have built a product called Abelobi. And Abelobi is a way that fishers in developing countries can report their catch, and it's a fantastic initiative. One lovely story I heard while I was there, I spoke to a lady from one of the developing African countries who was talking about how smartphones had changed her community and that they were using it to do all sorts of commerce and report their farming activities and buy goods and services. It was a fantastic story. But the thing that really made me work out that the world is developing at a different rate is that she said, we've got these phones, we have 5G, you know, we can watch movies from around the world and it's all fantastic, and it's the most important thing that we have it's the most important asset we have in our life. But she said the thing that is actually holding us back is that we don't have any power to charge our phones with because there isn't enough electricity. So, they missed out on roads, they missed out on power cables, but they've now got 5G, which we don't even have. So governments and regulators and scientists are all excited about how we might be able to use this new technology, and this photo here shows that there are many fisheries in the world that now have cameras on their vessels to watch what fishers are doing, and many fishers view that as a big brother approach. And a photo tells 1,000 words. Here's a protest against such an initiative coming out, and I like the guy that says, we're not pedophiles, we're fishermen, no VMS, it just shows the emotion. But we shouldn't be surprised that fishers are very secretive about their data, because a fisher's data is their IP. The best fishers catch more fish, use less fuel, get to the pub earlier. They really need what's in their head to make them fish better than their competitors. So they're scared about submitting their data electronically because they're worried that that data could be used for a purpose that it wasn't originally intended. And in my own state of South Australia, a lot of the fishers there believe the data they submitted in a regulatory form was used by the Department of Environment to set marine parks, which ultimately meant that some of them went out of business. So there's a lot of scepticism about how that data is used. And it's not unique to the fishing industry. I saw all sorts of electronic reporting initiatives happening as part of my Global Focus program, and also other things we did in our studies. Robot machines in milking machines in the Netherlands. The farmers were saying, we're collecting all this data, but we're not quite sure who owns it or what it's going to be used for in the future. And because of that, fishers go to great lengths to keep their data secure. They put it in safes. They write it in books and hide it under their beds. They leave it on their plotters or just keep it in their heads because they don't want that data to be compromised. And I believe that this paranoia is actually holding the industry back. In my view, fishers should be encouraged to collect data. They should be encouraged to collect lots of data. And this is a guy that really helped me in my personal study, a guy called Lang Solberg, who is helping us to develop our software in the American market, but he's a sockeye salmon fisherman, and just my wife wants to marry him, which is a side issue, but he's a cracking bloke, and he was very kind and showed me fantastic things as I walked through my travels. Fishermen can't afford not to collect the data, and you'll see lots of newspaper articles like the one that I've got here. When right whales die, lobstermen get nervous. And I went to the main lobster fishery as part of my travels, where they harvest over 130 million pounds of lobster per year. I mean, it's a staggering number. And the thing that just blew my mind was that, and I'm not sure, I got it from one person, I'm not sure that it's 100% validated, but they were saying less than 10% of the fleet that catch all of those lobsters are required to report their catch, and it's done by a lottery system. I mean, how you can have a wild-caught resource that got that sort of governance around it just blows my mind. But fishers don't just rape and pillage the sea, as many people would say that we do. We do lots of good things, and I met this fantastic lady called Catherine Barrett when I was in Ireland, and she's running a program where fishers are not only collecting the data, collecting rubbish when they go fishing. So when they trawl, they're pulling up other people's rubbish from the ocean floor. They're bringing it back and they're counting it. And it's all very well to bring it back, but unless you tell someone that you're bringing it back, you're not really getting the full benefit from it. And by collecting data like the rubbish we caught as well as the fish we caught, we're going to be able to manage our fisheries better into the future, and consumers who buy our fish will feel a lot more positive about the way that we run our businesses. Fishing data has a multiple of uses, and most of them aren't regulatory. The first customer that we had in South Australia was a lobster fishery who is collecting data on a pot-by-pot basis. So every pot that comes up, they count what fish was in it, how many eggs were on it, how many had broken legs, etc. The reality is the data the regulator requires is that tiny little dot down at the bottom there. The regulator doesn't require fine-scale information. They just want to know when you caught it, and how much you caught. But by collecting over 10 million pot lifts, which is what we've done in this fishery, that data can be used for so many other things, like counting our interactions with endangered species or provenance. We can do all sorts of things about counting pollution and the plastics we see in the sea. We can correspond with our fleets. I mean, having an iPad or a computer on your boat is going to change the way that we manage our fisheries moving forward. So what I think we need to remove this fear that the fishers have got about where their data is going is we need to introduce a thing that I'm suggesting we call a fish bank, a place where fishers feel that their data can be stored in a way that it can't be used against them into the future. And it's my key learning. I thought I was going there to go and find customers for my software. I've actually come back with a far more altruistic approach saying, no, this is bigger than what my personal goals are to sell our software. We need to actually find a way that we encourage the fishers to collect their data. Doesn't matter how they do it, we just need to make sure they do it. So I think we need a board, and the board should consist of people who have got experience in the fishing industry, former regulators and scientists, because I think if you had current ones, they would be compromised. You need an IT visionary on the board to say this is where technology is headed. Some legal advice to say we've got your data and we've got the legal protection around it to protect you. I think such a board could be fantastic for the fishing industry, but all the other agricultural enterprises that I looked at as well need to store their data in a safe place. So the top chart shows you, or diagram shows you what I think the regulators would like to occur. That is, the fisher sends their data directly to the data warehouse, whereas alternatively, what I'm proposing is that the data, all of the data, not just the regulatory data, gets washed in a fish bank and then goes off to the final regulator. And we shouldn't just be counting the commercial catch. A fish doesn't look at a hook and say, that hook is a commercial hook, it takes the bait on whatever hook it is. Commercial data is as important as recreational data, and we should be counting it in the same format. We need to give fishers the opportunity to harmonise their data in the same way you can swap from Telstra to Optus to Vodafone. We need to make sure that fishers believe they're not locked into a single solution. They can swap from one supplier to another and keep their data in the same way you keep your phone numbers or photos. So thank you very much for your time. That's my GFP group in Japan. I love you guys. I love the whole Nuffield experience despite my age, and thank you very much for your time.